Good evening. Today we have architect Madhura Prematillake with us for the design talk of Living Monsoon. Welcome, sir. I have few interesting questions to ask and to get an answer from you. So shall we proceed?
Yes.
Sir, I want to start asking what are the key principles and philosophies that guide your architecture practices at Team Architrave, and how is it contributing to the cultural and environmental context of Sri Lanka?
You want me to answer for 5 minutes or for 5 hours?
You can.
You just asked me to explain my whole life.
Okay.
I will try to give you the shortest possible answer.
Sure.
Okay, we looking back at our work, we try to put down our intentions in what we call a manifesto, and it's something I have talked about often. You find it on our website and so forth. There are some key ideas, and they are all drawn from the idea of cultural and environmental sustainability. So, one key idea is to build less,
Okay.
to reduce the brief, to build on less. That we set out with a target to build only on 50% of the plot.
Okay.
So by doing this, we reduce the consumption, and that's our take on the whole thing about sustainability. That we just have to reduce consumption.
Okay.
World is driven to consume more and more. So in the name of green architecture, green buildings, we are told to consume more and more technology. Green technology, it comes with its labels. I'm afraid I don't believe in these ratings and labels. I just think that we should consume less. As architects, as nations, as people, we should consume less. And that's my take on sustainability. And in our manifesto, there are a whole lot of other things about building on what is left over, building inside and outside, building robust so that buildings need less maintenance and so forth. There's a whole list of things. But the key take on sustainability is this idea of consuming less.
So, what are the primary challenges faced when implementing the sustainable design solution, especially in the monsoon climatic condition of Sri Lanka, and how do you address it?
One of the things I have constantly said we can do in this monsoon region, because our climate, despite the rain, it did not used to go to extremes.
Okay.
But now it's going to extremes. So I have long believed that we should face east and west without fear. That the climate is mild enough to be able to control it by methods of screening or vegetation or what. But, and this is a belief I have held for a long time, and many of my buildings have done that. But now I have to question myself. These old assumptions may need to be revised, because the climate has become very extreme. Changes in the climate are extreme. We gave you the gift of a cyclone which came by Sri Lanka and landed here 2 days ago. The devastation in my country was enormous, and this kind of climatic event happens ever more often. So the old assumptions need to be questioned. So we need to think deeper about these assumptions.
Looking at your projects, the most curious part for me was the materiality and the detailing of that. So, how do you balance the materiality and detailing and creating such designs which are both aesthetically pleasing and sustainable?
One of the earliest kind of experiments I did was to question the idea of the veranda. Because, the veranda is a wonderful space. It's inside, outside. It protects. The sloping roof protects from the rain and the sun. and it creates an in-between space where you can go in and you can go out.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that all our traditional buildings which use the veranda are in fact dark and damp.
Okay.
And we have long romanticized this, but the fact is that they are dark and damp. So I began to question how one could create a veranda space or a type of veranda space which is not dark and damp. And so we started to experiment with elements like wooden pergolas, cane tat shading, glass roofs protected from UV, and elements like that. So this experimental veranda has now become quite a strong element in the way we create the language, in the way we create materiality, because it also deals, you take advantage of the shadows, the sun falls through it, so the space protects you, but it is not dark. The light travels through it, the sun travels through it, so that it forms patterns from morning to evening. It creates different environments. So it's a more joyful space, in my opinion. The other aspect which I use a lot is different types of screens and what do you call, vegetation, timber screens, steel screens, different types of screening systems. Timber screens we use a lot. Because it allows the breeze to pass through and cuts the sun and the rain. And even in very harsh climates, I find that it works. So these things form the materiality, the language, and they create a response to climate.
So also I would like to ask one more thing. Is there any specific reason or specific example that you could address for promoting the local craftsmanship through this? Is there anything particular like that?
We work a lot with wood, and when I say local craftsmanship, I believe in promoting the craftsmen who are there now. I'm not trying to bring back some craft which was there before and lost. So I work a lot with wood and with very specific detailing, which is meant to respond to certain climatic conditions, which requires really good craftsmen to achieve. And uh, uh, across so many projects, in projects both in Sri Lanka and in projects we have done here, I have formed these really good bonds with carpenters who really begin to enjoy these details, and they develop these, they suggest improvements. And sometimes for a project in Colombo, I will call a carpenter in somewhere in India, in Bangalore, and ask him, what did you do when this problem happened in the project in Bangalore? So so there's been a kind of collaboration with particularly with wood workmanship, which has been very. And the other thing is that over the 20 or 30 years I've been practicing, I've worked with a few small builders, and those builders, I continue to work with them, and we've developed methods of working, which I believe is the cornerstone of helping an economy to move, that you work with smaller entities rather than big ones.
Another one is a very personal question. Like, among all of your projects, which one holds a special place and why is it so?
So there are two. One is a building which I call the Longhouse, which is the point at which I specifically sought move away from. This is something I'll be talking about this evening as well. Move away from the idea of the umbrella roof and the courtyard, which were considered two kind of very strong elements of Sri Lankan traditional architecture and Sri Lankan modernism. So I moved away from that for very specific reasons, not because I was trying to express myself, but because I felt that there were other solutions that needed to be explored. And that the Longhouse was the very first exploration of that. And it gave a lot of strength for me to take those ideas forward. And 20 years later, I built my own house. And there, almost all the, not almost, but all the intentions stated in my manifesto, we were able to realize that. And so therefore, that became the best example of what we try to do. For example, the idea of building small. I live in an extremely small house, and each room, each bay is only 9 feet, 2.7 meters wide. And people ask me, young architects ask me, how do you convince a client to build small spaces? I show it to them. So that is why, and it never crosses their mind that this is only 9 feet wide. So, but it helps me to argue that case for smaller spaces. So therefore, my own house is very special because it's a vehicle for all those ideas.
Sir, one more final question. Like, what is the vision of future of the architecture in Sri Lanka, especially in the context of climate resilience and sustainability? And what is the take of Team Architrave on that?
I believe that the opportunities that, okay, like India, Sri Lanka has a lot of young architects who have an enormous potential. But they don't necessarily get the opportunity to express themselves, to design buildings which will show off that ability, those new ideas that they have. And that's because for a long time, the method of distributing work, say public buildings, has simply been based on who you know. If you know some important politician, you will get a project or more. If you don't, you won't. And I believe that countries which have made a lot of progress, and one of the big influences in my life was the 5 years I spent in Finland. I was studying, then I was teaching and working there. And the idea of competitions as a basis for awarding public buildings, that is something I really want to promote back in Sri Lanka. That there is, if you do that and give opportunities to young architects, then all their ideas will come out in the open. Otherwise, they will continue to be just ideas, never expressed, while the same old people keep on building, using the opportunities that are there. Secondly, I think Sri Lanka needs to focus on the underserved communities. And there are two particular communities that I would like to focus on. One is the urban poor, and that's the same wherever. And they have, in Sri Lanka over the last 10 years, in Colombo, in the city, large numbers of them have been moved out of the urban locations that they used to inhabit into apartments. And they got a very raw deal. They have lost their livelihoods. They live in very cramped situations. And I believe that we should have a renewed focus on the urban poor. And the other community which has been really deprived in the entire history of the country is the worker community of the tea plantations, who have been, I mean, for a long time they were not even citizens, but even after they got citizenship, they have been treated like second-class citizens and living in extremely cramped conditions without any hope of developing themselves or social mobility or education and so forth. Very, very minimal possibility. And I believe we as a country need to focus on these deprived communities. Otherwise, our future is our future is very fragile anyway. But it will be extremely fragile if we don't focus on the most vulnerable. So that's our thinking, and this is something I try to spread whenever I have the mic. So that's why I'm saying it here, that we need to focus on this. Otherwise, the entire structure of society will collapse.
Yeah, it is actually insightful, take, and it was so delightful to hear that, because being in India or being in Kerala, we are so connected and close to Sri Lanka, and we always look after the Baba's works, or the architects' works in Sri Lanka, and we have so similarity even with the monsoon climatic conditions are much similar with both the areas. So it was grateful to have you here and to listen more with you. And I hope today evening I could hear more about this coming project and about the whole thing. So it was a wonderful time with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to be here. I've been here before, and it's wonderful to be back. And I look forward to a good dialogue this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.